I want you to picture something. Just hold this image in your head. You are holding a perfectly transparent, solid crystal.
Okay, yeah.
It feels just like a piece of glass, right? Hard and rigid.
Totally solid, yeah.
Right. So now imagine we start cooling this crystal down, and as the temperature drops, inside that perfectly still, solid rock, something invisible actually starts moving.
Which is just wild to even think about.
It really is. These invisible electrical domains, they begin crossing over and under one another, basically spontaneously weaving themselves into this intricate three-dimensional fabric.
An electrical tapestry, essentially.
Exactly. And then you shine a beam of focused green light directly into the crystal. And where that green light hits, it acts like, well, like a pair of invisible scissors, locally snipping and unraveling the woven pattern.
I mean, it sounds like an illusion, right?
Oh.
Or complete science fiction. But we are actually looking at one of the most stunning examples of solid-state physics in years.
Oh, absolutely.
This is a material that essentially weaves its own internal architecture without ever physically deforming its shape.
And the mystery here is, how does a hard, rigid solid seemingly weave itself? And maybe more importantly, why should anyone trying to build a better computer actually care?
Right, the real-world application.
Yeah. Think about ordinary computer memory for a second. The solid-state drive-in, say, a standard laptop, is actually incredibly vulnerable.
Very fragile, yeah.
At a microscopic level, data is just localized electrical charges. If the device gets too hot, the thermal energy literally jiggles the atoms, and those charges can just bleed away.
Or you get electromagnetic noise.
Exactly. Electromagnetic noise or a stray burst of radiation can flip a 0 to a 1 and just permanently scramble the data. But what if information could be stored using what physicists call topological protection?
Which changes everything.
Right. What if the data was locked into the physical shape and connectedness of a structure? It would be nearly indestructible.
And that is the ultimate promise of what we're unpacking today. If information is encoded not just in a fragile, localized charge, but in a globally knotted, interwoven structure.
The weave.
Yeah, the weave.
Yes.
You create a memory system that doesn't just resist noise. It fundamentally ignores it.
Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to trace the evolution of electrical polarization inside crystals. We're going to follow the science from orderly two-dimensional whirlpools to particle-like nanobubbles, all the way to this globally connected, self-weaving 3D fabric.
It's quite a journey.
It is. We will explore how this geometrical evolution might just be the blueprint for tomorrow's robust memory storage. So, let's start with the foundation. What is actually happening when we talk about electrical domains inside a crystal?
Well, we have to look at ferroelectricity and polarization. In certain materials, the atoms are arranged in a specific lattice that creates these tiny electric dipoles.
Okay.
Essentially, you have a slight positive charge on one end of a unit cell
Right.
and a slight negative charge on the other end.
So it's kind of like a vast grid of tiny compass needles. But instead of pointing north, these needles are pointing in the direction of their electrical charge.
Exactly like compass needles. And just like magnetic compasses, they influence each other. They all want to point in the same direction to save energy.
Stay stable.
Right. When a whole neighborhood of these needles lines up pointing the exact same way, that creates a uniform block. And that block is what we call a domain.
Got it. So normally these domains are pretty straightforward, right?
Very straightforward.
Yeah.
You get blocky regions pointing up, down, left, or right. The story really gets interesting when scientists started forcing these compass needles into incredibly tight spaces, which creates severe conflicts.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, a major breakthrough on this front was published in Nature in 2016 by Yadav and a team of researchers. They engineered these specialized superlattices by sandwiching alternating ultra-thin layers of lead titanate and strontium titanate.
So by alternating those materials at the nanoscale, they were basically trapping those electrical dipoles in a microscopic tug-of-war.
That's a perfect way to put it. The dipoles were caught between competing forces. First, you had elastic energy because the crystal lattice was physically strained by the differing sizes of the alternating layers.
The layers just didn't quite fit perfectly together.
Right. Then you had electrostatic energy, which is the dipoles naturally trying to align with each other. And crucially, you had gradient energy.
Gradient energy. I always think of that like a thick rubber band.
How so?
Well, nature penalizes sudden, sharp folds, If you bend a stiff rubber band, it wants to curve smoothly. It takes a lot of energy to force it into a sharp, jagged angle.
That captures it perfectly, actually. The dipoles want to transition their orientation gradually. So to resolve this massive energetic frustration, the strain of the layers, the desire to align, and the penalty for sharp turns, the electric dipoles did something brilliant.
They didn't just form blocks.
No, instead of forming simple straight blocks, they rotated smoothly, curling into ordered nanoscale whirlpools. They formed a beautiful polar vortex-anti-vortex array.
Okay, wait, let me jump in here. If you're listening and picturing a whirlpool right now, you might be imagining like a flowing liquid. But to be totally clear, the material here is entirely solid.
It's completely solid.
The atoms are locked in their crystal lattice. Nothing is physically washing around. It is only the orientation of the electrical charge that is swirling.
Right, it's not physical movement.
Right, like if
Huh.
you could walk along the surface of the crystal and check the direction of those tiny compass needles, you'd find them pointing in a continuous curling circle. It's a static structure, but its geometry is a vortex.
A frozen whirlpool of electricity, yeah. And it was a massive step forward in proving that we could engineer complex topological structures in a solid state.
But there's a problem with a 2D whirlpool, isn't there?
Oh, definitely.
Because if you want to pack billions of these into a hard drive to store data, you can't really use sprawling two-dimensional lines. You need something compact and self-contained in 3 dimensions.
Right, you have to pack them in tight.
So the researchers had to figure out how to pinch that whirlpool into a sphere.
And that necessity drove the next major leap, which was published by Des and colleagues in Nature in 2019.
Okay, so 3 years later?
Yep. They took the 2016 concept and altered the material constraints. By tweaking the boundary conditions and the strain in those superlattices, they discovered they could force the polarization to do something even more complex.
They squeezed it.
Basically, yeah. The swirling lines collapsed into compact, roughly 8-nanometer polar skyrmions that were actually stable at room temperature.
Okay, skyrmion. That is one of those heavy physics words. Let's translate that for everyone. A skyrmion is basically a particle-like bubble of polarization, right?
Exactly.
And it has what physicists call chirality, which is a specific handedness, like a left-handed or right-handed twist, and a topological number of +1.
The topological number is the defining feature here. It means the structure is mathematically distinct from the empty space around it.
Meaning you can't just undo it easily.
Right. You cannot smoothly flatten it out without breaking it entirely.
This is where knot theory becomes a really helpful tool to understand it. It's like tying a knot in a shoelace. It is still just a shoelace, right? It's made of the same exact material as the rest of the string, but its shape gives it new, stable properties that a flat lace just doesn't have.
Exactly.
You can slide the knot up and down, you can pull on the string, but the knot stays a knot until you deliberately untie it, and that is topological protection.
That's a great analogy. And, just as we clarified with the whirlpools, when we call a skyrmion a bubble, we are marking the limits of the analogy.
Right, not a soap bubble.
All right, these are not hollow soap bubbles filled with air. They are completely solid, compact topological objects made entirely of electrical orientation. They behave like particles, but they are just patterns of charge within the crystal.
So, okay, we went from swirling 2D lines to compact, stable 3D bubbles. We showed that we can create robust, localized topological defects, but again, if the goal is a truly indestructible memory system, isolated bubbles really aren't enough.
No, they aren't.
Because memory requires massive interconnected architecture. You need a network where the data points talk to each other. So how do we go from an isolated bubble to a globally connected system?
Well, that question shifts our entire conceptual scale.
Huh.
And this brings us to the 2026 paper published in Light Science and Applications by Zinn and an international team of researchers.
The big turning point.
Huge turning point. They moved away from localized defects, like those individual skyrmion knots, and discovered an extended, globally connected fabric.
And what's fascinating to me is that the star of this 2026 paper isn't some engineered ultra-thin superlattice anymore.
No, it's not.
It's a bulk transparent crystal called KTN-Li, which is potassium lithium tantalate niobate.
Right. So KTN-Li is a solid solution perovskite crystal.
Perovskite.
Yeah, perovskite refers to a specific cage-like crystal structure. Because of how the atoms are arranged in these cages, the central atoms have a little bit of wiggle room. And when the temperature changes, those atoms can shift slightly off-center, which creates that electrical dipole we talked about earlier. Shin and the team looked really closely at what happens during its phase transition, specifically at its Curie point.
Right, and every ferroelectric material has a Curie point. It's a specific temperature where it transitions from being highly symmetric and nonpolar to a state of lower symmetry where it suddenly develops spontaneous polarization.
Exactly.
And for this specific KTN Lee crystal, that Curie point is right around 292 Kelvin, which is just about 19 degrees Celsius, so basically room temperature.
Right. So the researchers took this crystal and cooled it down incredibly slowly. The critical phenomena actually happen in a very precise, tiny temperature window.
How tiny?
Very tiny. When they get to about 2 degrees Kelvin below the Curie point, spontaneous symmetry breaking occurs.
Symmetry breaking always sounds so abstract, but it's really just the material being forced to make a choice, isn't it?
Basically, yeah.
It's hovering between states full of chaotic thermal energy, and as it cools, it has to finally decide how to align its electrical domains.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And because of the specific constraints within this bulk crystal, the system doesn't just form simple blocks. And it doesn't form isolated skyrmion bubbles either.
Right.
Instead, the electrical domains spontaneously form an irregular three-dimensional woven fabric.
I have to admit, when I first read this, I genuinely had to pause. Because how does a hard crystal have threads running through it? Like, did the rock literally turn into a microscopic sweater?
I know the imagery is incredibly striking, so let's ground it in the physical reality. The crystal itself remains a perfectly smooth, hard rock.
Okay.
There is zero physical deformation. If you ran your finger over it or scanned its surface topography with an atomic force microscope, it is completely flat and rigid.
Okay, so the threads aren't material fibers. We are back to our compass needles.
We are. Imagine bundles of these compass needles all pointing in one direction, forming a continuous curving line of electrical charge. That is your thread.
Okay, I see it.
Imagine another bundle of compass needles pointing in a different direction, curving to pass over the first bundle.
Oh, wow. It really is an electrical tapestry. And the researchers actually mapped this out using knot theory, right?
Yes, they did.
They found that these domain threads physically cross over and under each other in three-dimensional space. An overcrossing has a linking number of +1, and an undercrossing has a linking number of -1.
Right, and when these threads of electrical polarization curve and intersect, they create severe electrical conflicts at their boundaries. These interfaces are called charge domain walls, or CDWs.
The CDWs, okay.
A CDW is essentially a locked-in region of very high electrostatic energy, sitting right at the node where the threads weave together. It's the energetic glue holding the crossing in place.
Okay, so let me summarize where we are. We have this transparent room temperature crystal. We cool it down just a tiny bit, 2 degrees, and its internal electrical charges spontaneously organize themselves into a complex 3D woven fabric locked together by these high-energy charged domain walls.
That's it, exactly.
So we've got the fabric. Now let's talk about the scissors.
Ah, yes, the scissors. So the researchers wanted to see if they could manipulate this locked-in topological fabric. So they used a confocal laser scanning system.
Okay.
They took a 514 nanometer laser, which is visible green light, focused it down, and scanned it right through the surface of the crystal.
And where the green light touched the woven fabric, the threads locally disentangled. The interlaced pattern unraveled into a much simpler, unlinked parallel structure.
Yep.
The green light acted exactly like invisible scissors cutting the threads of the weave, which of course begs the question, why does a beam of light cut an electrical weave?
Well, the mechanism relies on something called a band gap. Even though the KTN-like crystal is transparent, it actually has impurities deep within its structure. The band gap is essentially an energy hurdle that electrons have to jump over to become mobile.
And the 514 nanometer green light has exactly the right amount of energy to kick electrons from those impurities right over the hurdle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That creates what we call photoinduced charges.
Right.
So suddenly you have free-floating electrical charges generated locally inside the crystal.
Okay.
And those charged domain walls, the CDWs, at the crossings of the weave, they are regions of very high bound electrostatic energy.
The glue.
Right, the glue. When the green light creates these new mobile photoinduced charges, they rush in and screen the bound energy of the CDWs.
Oh, they neutralize the energetic glue that was forcing the threads to curve and cross.
Precisely.
So once that electrostatic tension is neutralized, the high-energy woven structure is finally allowed to relax. It falls out of its complex topological knot and settles into a simpler, flat, parallel configuration.
Right. And to prove that this was a highly specific mechanism and not just, the laser heating up the crystal, the researchers tried scanning the fabric with a 1040 nanometer infrared pump laser.
Right. And the infrared light has a longer wavelength and lower energy, so it just didn't have enough juice to kick the electrons over the band gap. The fabric ignored it completely. It only responded to the specific wavelength of the green light.
But what's even more fascinating is what happens if you want the weave back.
Oh, you can get it back.
Yeah, but you can't just shine a different light to reweave the exact same pattern. What you can do is thermal cycle the crystal. If you heat the crystal back up above its Curie point, the domains dissolve. The compass needles randomize.
Okay, so it melts the structure, and then if you slowly cool it down again, passing through that crucial 2-degree window,
The spontaneous symmetry breaking happens again.
the fabric weaves itself anew.
Yes, but, and this is key, it weaves a completely different randomized realization.
Oh, wow.
The pattern of over and under crossings, the distribution of those linking numbers, it is entirely new.
That is incredible. The structure is history dependent. It encodes its new thermal history into a new geometrical arrangement.
Exactly.
So, if I'm understanding the physics of this randomness here, when you heat the crystal, you are essentially melting the internal order. As it cools back down through that critical 2-degree window, billions of dipoles are trying to minimize their energy all at the same time amidst chaotic thermal fluctuations.
The highly dynamic.
Right. So there isn't just one perfect preordained weave. There are millions of equally valid tangled states, so the material just settles into a new, random, low-energy configuration. It's playing thermodynamic roulette.
Thermodynamic roulette. That chaotic search for a low-energy state is exactly why the resulting topology changes every time. It is a stunning observation.
Truly.
But, we really have to look at the boundaries of this science. The researchers have not built a functioning photonic or neuromorphic memory device yet.
Right, we need to temper expectations here.
Yeah, you cannot go out and buy a KTN crystal hard drive. There are significant fundamental limitations right now.
We should definitely list those out. First, this effect relies on highly specialized materials, right? That specific KTN Lie composition.
Yes.
And it only works in an incredibly restricted temperature range.
Right.
The weaving only exists between 2 and 8 Kelvin below the Curie point.
That's a tiny window.
If the ambient temperature fluctuates too much, the domain walls just dissolve and the fabric vanishes. That is a completely impractical operational window for any commercial device right now.
Furthermore, there are massive questions remaining about scalability. This was observed on a microscopic scale. Could it be scaled up to a macroscopic memory bank? We don't know.
Right.
And maybe more importantly, the read-write mechanism is currently very blunt.
Yeah, the scissors.
Right. The green laser can disentangle the weave, which you could think of as an erase or a write-zero function, and thermal cycling randomizes the whole thing. But we do not yet have a way to reliably write specific ordered data to targeted nodes in the weave.
You can't just point a laser and say, hey, tie a knot right here.
Exactly. The weaving is spontaneous.
So with all those caveats, why does this 2026 paper matter so much? Like, what is the ultimate takeaway for the field?
It matters because it proves a concept that previously we only saw in biology or complex mathematics. Yeah, biological systems use woven topology for robust information storage all the time. Think of the double helical structure of DNA, or the bundled woven fiber networks of the human brain. The geometry is what provides this stability.
Oh, I see. So if one strand in a biological network gets jostled by a stray molecule, the whole structure doesn't just collapse because it's locked into its neighbors.
Exactly. It's a biomimetic approach to stability.
Wow.
What Sin and the team proved is that this kind of globally connected topological network can spontaneously form in a solid-state, non-biological material.
That matter just inherently does this.
Right. It shows us that matter has the innate capability to organize itself into these highly stable, noise-resistant architectures.
It gives engineers and physicists a radically new blueprint for future computing. I mean, even if it takes decades to turn into a consumer device, we now know it's physically possible to create an optically addressable 3D topological network inside a solid crystal.
And this could eventually lay the groundwork for advanced neuromorphic computing computers that physically mimic the interconnected structure of the brain, or even photonic computing, where we use light instead of electricity to process data.
It really forces us to rethink how we interact with materials. So let's bring it all back to where we started. Picture that transparent crystal sitting in your hand again, perfectly rigid, perfectly still.
But so much is happening inside.
Exactly. As the temperature shifts just a fraction of a degree, invisible electrical threads are silently crossing over and under one another, weaving an invisible fabric. And a single beam of green light acts as scissors, cutting the threads and reshaping the internal landscape.
It's just a profound shift in how we understand the capabilities of a simple solid.
I want to leave you with a thought that connects this all together. We talked earlier about a traditional solid-state hard drive being vulnerable, right? Think of the data on that hard drive like a single straight shoelace. If heat or radiation hits it, it's incredibly easy to cut or scramble that straight line of data. For decades, we've tried to protect that straight shoelace by building thicker walls around the computer or writing software to guess what the shoelace looked like after it was broken.
Right, patching the damage.
Exactly. But if matter can encode its own history into an electrical tapestry, perhaps the indestructible computer memory of tomorrow won't be a straight string hidden behind thick walls.
It'll be structural.
Yes, perhaps it will be a shoelace tied into millions of microscopic interconnected knots. Even if heat or noise pulls on the string, the data doesn't disappear. The knot simply tightens. The topology itself becomes the vault. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. If you enjoyed the conversation, please take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, keep questioning what's beneath the surface.